retired. The teacher that had that classroom had retired. There was nothing in that classroom. There weren't even
No,
teacher
you're good.
manuals.
I'm just gonna go ahead and put you on speaker or something.
Oh, so she took it all?
Just gave it away. I mean, anything that was in there. There were four, this is 94, there were 4 computers in the classroom, for 4th grade. They were in the other teacher's classroom and they weren't forthcoming. I had 30 kids. Imagine that happening to somebody right out of college with no life experience. Gloria came to my rescue. We had old Apple computers. We pieced together, and my kids had computers. As it turned out, a few weeks later, there were 6 brand new government computers because we were teaching on Fort Bragg. That was just government property from one location that found its way to another government location. I had some success. I had some failures. I felt that every student could learn. I had one year where every one of my students, every one of them was in the 90th percentile for reading, language arts, science, and math. And it wasn't all me. It had to do with being mentored by their peers voluntarily. I don't know what grade levels you were working at, but I chose an activity that's physics, physical science. I came out of an environment, and every school that I consult with and where I teach now, I use the acronym STEAM as opposed to STEM. And I put that A in because I've taught with elementary school, and you can't teach without the art piece. I use science as a hook. I'm not especially trained in science. My career in the Army was Special Forces. I did work with explosives and engineering and stuff, so there was some background there. And I worked with Third World soldiers whose cognitive level was about where 4th graders are. So here's one thing I'm going to ask you to do for me, and that is, as we go through the lesson, see if you can pick out the components of STEAM: the science, technology, the engineering, the art, and the math. Actually, I'm going to teach this lesson to a 4th grade when I leave here. I have a class at 10 minutes to 2, so.
So you're practicing on that?
Well, I've actually taught this before. I taught it yesterday to the 4th grade. The way I get the kids.
Engineering, arts, and math.
So, what I'd like to do is start with a video. I am a believer of tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you've taught them. But my review is Socratic. It's a matter of asking questions. It's a review. And I've found that very often a video, if you have, everybody has the ability to go to YouTube and bring it into your classroom. It's a YouTube free video, and this will explain our experiment. The lesson plan would be labeled Newton's three laws. And so Gloria, if we can run the video, you don't particularly have to be focused on the video, but you'll see how I use this as an introduction for Newton's laws.
Oops.
You might want to start at the beginning.
Yeah, might want to go back to the beginning.
Or wondered what causes your bicycle to move. When I thought about why it goes forward instead of backwards or sideways. Perhaps not, and you wouldn't see it alone. It wasn't until the 17th century that Isaac Newton described the fundamental laws of motion and the emphasis began asking these 3 questions. What Newton recognized was that things tend to keep on doing what they are already doing. So when your bicycle is stopped, it stays stopped. And when it is going, it stays going. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and objects at rest tend to stay at rest. That's Newton's first law. Physicists call it the law of inertia, which is a fancy way of saying that moving objects don't spontaneously speed up, slow down, or change direction. It is this inertia that you must overcome to get your bicycle moving. Now you know that you have to overcome inertia to get your bicycle moving, but what is it that allows you to overcome it? Well, the answer is explained by Newton's second law. In mathematical terms, Newton's second law says that force is the product of mass and acceleration. To cause an object to accelerate or speed up, a force must be applied. The more force you apply, the quicker you accelerate. And the more mass your bicycle has, and the more mass you have too, the more force you have to use to accelerate at the same rate. This is why it would be really difficult to pedal a 10,000-pound bicycle. And it is this force, which is applied by your legs pushing down on the pedals, that allows you to overcome Newton's law of inertia. The harder you push down the pedals, the bigger the force, and the quicker you accelerate. Now, on to the final question. When you do get your bike moving, why does it go forward? According to Newton's third law, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. To understand this, think about what happens when you drop a bouncy ball. As the bouncy ball hits the floor, it causes a downward force on the floor. This is the action. The floor reacts by pushing on the ball with the same force, but in the opposite direction, upward, causing it to bounce back up to you. Together, the floor and the ball form what's called the action-reaction pair. When it comes to your bicycle, it is a little more complicated. As your bicycle wheels spin clockwise, the parts of each tire touching the ground push backwards against the earth. The actions. The ground pushes forward with the same force against each of your tires. The reactions. Since you have two bicycle tires, each one forms an action-reaction pair with the ground. And since the earth is really, really, really big compared to your bicycle, it barely moves from the force caused by your bicycle tires pushing backwards. But you are propelled forward. I'm Dr. Jumpin'.
Thank you, ma'am.
Today, we're going to explore patterns of motion.
And let's talk about Isaac Newton. Back before George Washington,
Sorry.
and if you will bear with me, I'll take this from a perspective of maybe I'm teaching in 8th grade. Back before George Washington, Isaac Newton was a scientist in England. There's an urban legend that says he was sitting underneath an apple tree, apple bonked him on the head, and he discovered gravity. Well, Isaac Newton didn't discover anything. Everything that we're going to talk about, these 3 laws, happened when God created everything. What Isaac Newton did, and here's a teacher word, he codified what was already existing. He knew that if something was just laying there, it wasn't going to move until another force acted on it. If something was moving, it took another force to cause it to stop. He knew that the harder you kicked the ball or threw a ball, the further it would go. And finally, he knew that if you smacked a student on the back of the head, that would create an action, and the reaction would happen when the student's head snapped back and started to cry. Now you know what my discipline policy is. Gloria, a colleague of mine, ran into one of our colleagues, I don't know who it was, and when they came up with my name, the first thing that she said is, I have no idea how he got away with what he did.
We don't tell.
So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to take what Isaac Newton codified, what he explained to us, these 3 basic laws. Now, in science, a law isn't like me not following the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit out here and getting a ticket. A law means that something has been researched, has been proven, and we can now it's a fact. So what we'll do is we'll create a model that we're going to be able to demonstrate these three laws. Now teachers, what I'm going to show you here came out of the closet with construction paper, and out of the dollar store, which is now $1.90, $1.25 store, marbles. Stay away from school tools and the websites that are dedicated to teachers. You can find everything that you need away from it. Now, I'm going to give everybody 8 marbles. And by the by, you can't walk into a store anymore and buy marbles. You have to go to the craft store or the dollar store to the craft section and buy those things that they put over in crafts, fill up flower pots with and stuff. So these marbles aren't perfectly round like the marbles. Would you like to play?
Oh, yeah, I'll press it.
What about you? No, not you.
Play is the opposite word there.
Another thing that is teaches a Wielandism, and that is that I like to have the students bring something home that they can demonstrate to their parents, their dog, their parakeet, whoever they might want to take the time to show them. So, at this moment, let's leave the marbles in the bags, and when you fold a paper in elementary school, there are 2 folds. There's a hamburger fold or a hot dog fold. We are going to make a hot dog fold. And students, the best way to do this is flat on your desk, flip the sides over, line them up, press them down, and then crease them. Please do this now. All right, elementary students, what shape did I start off with? When I folded it and put the hot dog fold in, how many pieces did I end up with? So what fraction would I have taken the first triangle and created this when I have 2 other, or first rectangle and created 2 other rectangles? What's that fraction?
Half one.
Exactly right. Now, we're going to take each half and we're going to fold it down so that the top of the half touches the bottom of the V. And we'll do this to both sides. Just flip it over. And I hope you'll come up with something that looks a bit like this. If you need help, I will. I'll help the boys for free. The girls, it will cost you $1.
Yeah. And a quarter.
Girls can't do math or science, so I have to. That's the way I raised my daughter. She went to NC State as an engineer. She showed me.
Math is my strong suit.
Now, what do I have here? How many pieces do I have? What would I call just one of these pieces?
1/4.
1/4, exactly right. What shapes do I have?
Rectangle.
What kind of rectangles? What does this kind of corner? What kind of shape is this?
Right.
It's right angle, right? Now, what we're going to do is this is going to be a trough that we're going to do our experiment in. But before we get going, here's what I need you to do. Since we're working with marbles, I don't want to step on a marble and fall down and go boom. So I want to create a way that we can keep the marbles in our trough. So if you would, go to one end where you see the wing sticking out and just give it a good tear. Not a big one, just a good one. If you see what I've done. Now, if you were 8th grade students or 6th grade students, I'd probably have you use a ruler. I would tell you that it needs to be 3 centimeters, 9 centimeters, something. But just now, all we're gonna do is put a tear in it. Then we're gonna open it up, and in the middle part of the V, we're going to make a same size tear down the middle of it. So, if you look at it, I have 1 tear, 2 tears, 3 tears.
3/4.
So he's one in the class, isn't he?
No, it's
Now, give me a thumbs up if you've got it. Here's what you need to do. Now, let's fold our flaps inward. Just fold them inward. So it will look like this. Now, if I put my experiment down, I can keep these flaps folded in, and if I do my experiment, I can put my marbles here and have them roll in this direction, and this will stop my marbles from going all over the floor. Now here's how our experiment's going to go, and I'm going to let you do this on your own. You're going to take 5 of your 8 marbles. You're going to put your experiment on the table in front of you, and now what you have is a trough, place for those marbles to be. And I want you to take 5 marbles and put them about in the middle. Now, if I was teaching a math lesson and I said about, what math principle would we be talking about when I say about?
rounding.
Rounding and estimating. If I had 97 cents in my hand, about how much money is that?
$1.
Exactly right. Now, if you would, please, put 5 marbles touching each other about in the middle. It's very important, and I've made a mistake, and what I want you to do is either put this sideways to you, or have the open part facing you, and the closed part where we put the flaps away from you, one way or the other. So, once you get it settled in, have your marbles touching. Now, please take 1 marble and put it at the open end. All the way at the open end. Remember, you want 5 marbles together, then you take one of the remaining 3, and now what I want you to do is to flick that 1 marble at the rest. See what happens. How many marbles displaced?
1.
So was that an equal action?
I don't know, all 9 of them. You got the power group.
Yeah, there is one in every crowd, isn't there? Let me see.
How many yours was down? All of them?
Yes,
Is that 2?
I'll be over
think it's
there.
the
All right, let's do this.
Oh, it's the 4th. Woo!
The desk must be slanted. I got a powerful
Yeah.
clicker.
One of mine moved, just like it was supposed to.
You saw that, how the one displaced. The other's displaced because this isn't level. Teachers, if you did this experiment and the desks weren't level, and they're not going to be, what would you do?
Come on, floor.
Exactly right, and I'll tell you what, if you're wise, you will put them on the floor in the hallway and create chaos where everybody sees what you're doing. Why would you do that? Because all the other classrooms are sitting there working on worksheets, and you're actually doing something.
If you remember it better. I feel like.
All right, 5 marbles together, about in the middle. Take 2 marbles, 2 of the remaining 3. Flick the 2 and see what happens.
Wait, like put them together?
Yeah, put the 2 together, put them at the end, flick them, have them hit the... What happened?
I got equal reaction. Choose my move.
How many marbles displaced?
2. It worked right this time.
2.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I actually didn't think that would happen.
2. How many moves did you- Just 2?
That mine was 2. Yeah, 2, 2. 2.
This is fun.
All right, here we go. Here's a chance for you to make a prediction. And in science, we call a prediction a hypothesis. Exactly right. Now,
Y'all making eggs today.
let me work on you here. Is a hypothesis a wild guess, or is it a guess based on experience and information that you have available?
The second one, the latter.
Exactly right. Do you have experience or information to make a hypothesis
Yes.
in this experiment? Tell me what that is.
Well, we know when we did it with 1 marble, 1 moved, and when we did it with 2 moved. So my best guess would be if we did it with 3 would move, and so on and so forth.
Let's do that, see what happens.
Okay.
Ah,
As long as I don't look it too powerful, it works.
Oh man. Well, so
So
what I
mine
thought
had-
was gonna happen when we first did the 2, I thought just on the ones I flicked, I thought only 1 would move.
did you, that's what you-
Let me ask you a question. If I put you together with a partner and you had a total of 16 marbles, what could you do to continue this experiment to find some other ideas? What could you do?
You flick 8 and see if 8 moves.
Okay. Well, what would be your prediction about that? Caught her with a mouthful.
That 8 would move, but we could also try to see what would happen if we didn't move these ones and we just flipped 1 and then we flipped another one to see like if only 1 would move.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would you two partner up? Would you two partner up? Would you two partner up and create your own experiment? I'll give you 7.5 minutes to do that.
We can connect them. I have a folder of mine.
Are you done?
And they all move.
Yeah, you can combine your marbles and then see what happens. What if you had 8 marbles in a row and hit it with 1? What would happen? If you had,
So what should
if you extended this experiment? Oh, I like the way these two have extended their loop. What I would do though is, if you don't mind, having done it before, let's lift this one up. Put it over. This
take
one.
1 out? Yeah, that's alright.
And that way, that would work more quickly.
So
Wait,
you
you
have
have
to go right here.
So this is what mine is here.
More.
Wait, here? Take the
Ours
side?
here.
Oh no!
Follow down. Oh, and then we have to have some of these up there.
All right, You're in timeout now.
And then what?
Hey, I've got it.
Oh, here it is.
No, there's another one there.
There was another one? You're in timeout twice.
Oh, you know what? See,
Either we
Three,
have a bunch of them,
essentially
or
what it
just
is.
five.
Yeah.
we did ones.
No cursing. Maybe half of it.
So right here?
Yeah, I mean, completely at the same time.
Are you serious?
You could.
I'll go slower.
You're fired.
You need a flicker. But put them apart. I wanna see.
Yeah, we're gonna do 4.
And then the last one should be, you know, like, yeah, like if it could jump. Like this one would hit that one, that last one.
Take, you could do blue.
So that's like 12.
Okay.
So that was April 4th, so that's April 4th.
One keeps on popping out over here.
Later.
I'll do 2. How about we both do 2?
Then it looked like equal goes to equal. Right.
See if we don't move that one to.
Equal doesn't, it doesn't, mine stayed and yours went.
Equal amount of-
You have 3 minutes.
Let's both do 1.
If you have.
What happens if you have 2 and you put 3 at the
Yeah,
end?
it says equal amount. If you flip it, equal amount. I don't know what else you could do.
Do like 3, 3.
That's really it.
Flip an equal amount. That's equal amount. You would flip it, like, that equal amount would move.
Still splits up equally.
Like either too soft or too hard. There's no right, just right. See? You said you wanted to see 3 and 3.
Can't master.
I mean, it did exchange the energy. These move faster than these.
You have 1 minute.
You see that?
Mm-hmm. I think the most interesting was when we did 3, 3, 3.
Yeah.
Two still moves.
To see that we do this,
Actually,
this
we've
one
got
comes
a-
here, this one goes to
Long
here,
way to
this
travel.
goes to here, and this one gets displaced.
Oh, two still moves?
And then we go over this one.
So the main number is split.
Please gather your own stuff. Return to your seats. Make sure you have your own marbles and you have marbles and your trough because we still have a couple of experiments to do. However, I'd like somebody to comment on an observation that they made about something that they experimented with.
We found out it was kind of cool. We set up 3 groups of 3 marbles and hit them with 1, and the first one moved 1, and it hit the second group, moved 1, and then moved 1 from the third
Oh, that's
group.
a good idea.
Interesting.
And
Yes,
we-
sir.
We both took 3 marbles and put them on each end and flipped them to see if it would have an opposite reaction.
Did they pop back out after they hit?
No.
Depending on how many marbles we would put at the end, either mine would stay and his would go back, or his would stay and mine would go back.
I see.
And then for us, like, you notice that, like, no matter the distance, it's still gonna be the same amount of marbles that go.
Because we put them together and you have a longer distance to flip, the same amount of marbles will move.
All right, teachers, I don't know what grade level you're gonna teach. Do you see how you could even use this in high school?
Yeah.
Do you see how you could extend this? How they could have their journals or their notes and extend this? Yet, you can do this with second grade and just have them thrilled and they will understand. If you're spiraling, whenever they will understand the basics of the 3 laws of motion. Let's continue. Please take all your marbles except 2 and put them in your bag.
This is also good for students too, that can follow directions.
I feel like my favorite, I don't know. Like, I feel like they'd be playing more with each other.
Marbles will be everywhere for it.
You just need 2 marbles. Put them together in the middle of your trough.
Do it the exact middle or about it.
Please put them about in the middle. There is one in every class, isn't there?
There's multiple in this class, I guess.
All right, I want you to cross your arms and in your best teacher voice, tell those marbles to move.
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 Move. Where's your teacher voice?
Move.
Oh, she's gonna have a polite teacher voice.
Good luck.
Because I use my mean voice as my mom voice.
Yeah,
so my
use your
teacher
mom
voice
voice.
is
Let's hear it.
nice. No.
How'd you do?
I-
Your stuff move?
No.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe if I would go like this.
What will it take to make those marbles move?
Air.
Mm-mm. Well, perhaps.
Oh, what was that word that he used?
Perhaps.
On the beginning of the video? Yeah, force.
Say it again. I said action.
Yes, exactly. You need a force. Stuff that's not moving ain't gonna move until there's an action on it, a force. Now, I know you all are soccer players because you're here at Methodist. When I'm on the pitch and I pass the ball, if I'm going across the pitch, the ball slows down after I kick it. Why? Why does the ball slow down? And actually, it would stop if nobody took my pass. Why?
The force of the ground.
Why doesn't it go on forever? Why
The
doesn't my
grass can
soccer?
slow it down.
Okay, what force does the grass apply to the ball? Let me give you a hint.
Reaction.
It's like
Friction.
Friction, exactly right. What else, what other force that's unseen, however, if I dropped my marbles,
Gravity.
so, is gravity a force?
Yes.
Is friction a force?
Yes.
Therefore, that ball would go on forever, except for gravity and friction. Newton's first law. Now, take your 1 marble away from your 2 and leave 1 about in the middle. And I want you to take the marble that you just picked up and gently, very gently, roll it towards the marble in the middle that's standing, very gently. Did that marble move very far?
not really.
Set up your experiment again. Put 1 about in the middle. Now, I want you to reach forward and put your hand at the other end of your trough, and I want you to smack that first marble and really smack that second marble. What happened?
Bounce back.
They bounced back, and they both ended up back in the middle.
Did it go further?
Yeah.
Did you add more force to your second shot
Yes.
than the first shot?
Mhm.
So, did the second shot go faster than the first shot?
Yes.
Let's see, force times mass equals acceleration, or acceleration times force and mass. You see what we're talking about here is Newton's second law of inertia. You smacked it harder, it hit harder, it went faster. And everything that you did before, when you had 5 marbles, hit it with 1, hit it with 2, hit it with 3, showed that for every action, there was an equal and opposite reaction. You rolled 1 marble at the group. Some of you had real long groups of marbles when you did your own experiment, rolled 1 marble at it, and regardless how long that chain was, only 1 marble displaced. Equal and opposite.
We can do 2, we start with 2, and then 2 would just move, 3 would just move.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would happen if we did 4?
4 would just move, well, we were trying it out to see.
And then we did like 8 and 8 or 4 and 4, and all 4 of them moved faster, but these continue to roll because there's like nothing
Sure.
stopping them. But you could still see that like the force was exchanged.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are a poor man's Newton's cradle. Probably somewhere in this complex on somebody's desk is a Newton's cradle. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, the swinging balls.
You have swinging balls. Usually you have 7.
What's it called again?
It's called Newton's cradle, although Newton never saw one. But they're on a frame, they're hanging by a string, and you take 1 ball and you hit it and 1 ball goes out. But then when it comes back, it hits the next one, it goes back and forth until the energy dissipates. This is doing the exact same thing, only it's close to being free. Close. Now, let's look at what we've just done. How did we demonstrate, first of all, will somebody verbalize in their own words Newton's first law?
A force in motion stays, an object in motion stays in motion.
How did we demonstrate that? How did we, in our experiment here, how did we demonstrate that an object at rest stays at rest? What did we do? We crossed our arms and used the teacher voice, and it didn't work. And then we talked about the second part of Newton's first law, and that was that a ball or an object will go on forever unless another force acts on it. And what were the forces we talked about? We talked about friction and gravity, and actually there's another force that very slight, but it had to do with the air pressure and the friction created by the air pressure. And an example that I would use is that, I know you can't do it if mom's driving, but if dad's driving, chances are he'll let you roll the window down and stick your hand out. And what happens when you stick your hand out like this at 60 miles an hour? So you know that there's something there with the air. So that same air is going to fight against that soccer ball.
What if you go like this?
Yeah, you can do.
I love putting a balloon in the car.
I like, when my wife's driving, I like to stick my head out the window, but she doesn't like the way I drool, so. Now, Newton's second law is force times mass equals acceleration, or force equals mass and acceleration. How did you prove that? We did it very simply with 2 marbles.
When we just slowly flipped it, or when we put a little bit more force into it so we could see how fast it moves and how much pressure it had when it hit our finger.
Excellent. Exactly right. And we did most of our experiment demonstrating Newton's third law, which is for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And how did we demonstrate that? What was, in your own words, what's a simple way to explain how that worked? Go ahead.
You could see, I don't know, like when you hit,
If I had a group of 5 balls,
and you hit 2 balls in that group, then 2 balls leave the group.
exactly right. So it's an equal reaction. If I roll 1 ball, 1's going to come off, 3, on and on and on. All right, now teachers, let's look at this lesson. What did I do for an introduction? What did I do to tell them what I'm going to tell them? Please.
The video.
Okay, what part of STEAM was that video?
Technology.
Exactly right. Then, when we did the experiment, where was the math?
Paper. We're folding into like fractions.
Exactly right. And you could have put measurement in that. You could have measured halfway, put a dot to be exactly. However, we did it discussing estimation or rounding. Where was the engineering? This is kind of a stretch, but
The folding and creating of something.
the folding, creating, and I see the engineering as putting this flap to keep the ball from rolling.
I think people think that engineering, because of connotation, they think of engineering, they think it has to be really something complex, like put together.
Like I think of your daughter's little town, like they engineered the town out of shapes.
But it doesn't have to be, it can be very simple.
What about art?
You know, the art might be a stretch, the folding, the origami, you know, you could have had them decorate this. There's a whole lot of things. Talked about the colors of the marbles. That art piece, like I say, that is not in the national standards. STEM is in the national standards. STEAM is an extension of that. So you saw how the lesson went. It was hands-on as opposed to a worksheet. Let's talk about how did I conclude the lesson? How did I do the review?
You asked a question,
What method is that called?
check on learning.
You're refreshing like what they were taught.
It's the Socratic method. It's what attorneys get taught, to ask questions, where you, as the students, gave the review. You will learn this, but students will learn a whole lot better from other students than they will from
And you
the
let us put
lecturer.
it in our own words.
And thank you, that was the last, that was the next step in my lesson plan. Well, it was 2 steps away, but because you brought it up, I'm going to bring this up. You may not have celebrated it, but yesterday was 3/14, which is
Do you
Pi
know he
Day.
was born?
More importantly than Pi Day, it was Albert Einstein's birthday.
Yes, it was.
And Uncle Albert was my kind of guy. Uncle Albert was such a professor. And quite honestly, Gloria demonstrates some Einstein points. A wonderful story, and I had to, my brother lives near Princeton, and I had to stand on the quad and think about this story. Albert Einstein was walking across the quad, and he had no courses. He taught nothing. He was there to think and there to come up with theories and there to run conferences and all, but he had no caseload when he was hired by Princeton. Had no student load when he was at Princeton. However, one of the graduate assistants stopped and talked to him and asked him a question, and Albert answered it, and he said, "Thank you, Dr. Einstein. I'd love to buy your lunch. May I?" And Einstein said to him, "Which direction was I heading, son, when you stopped me. He said, well, you're going that way towards your office. He said, then I've had my lunch. Same scenario, somebody asked him a question, he said, I'd like to follow up with this, doctor, may I call you in your office? And I said, certainly you may call me in my office. And he asked him, what is your number, doctor? And Einstein said, I don't know, I don't call myself. So, now you've had my Einstein story, but I'm going back to what you brought up. Albert Einstein said this, you don't understand anything unless you can teach it to a 6-year-old.
Say that again?
And I do writing something like that, explain the concept to, like if you're doing a higher level concept, explain it to a 6-year-old. Put it in language that a 6-year-old would understand.
You folks may be struggling just to match the curriculum and what your supervisors want you to do and to have successful test scores. Whether I had a 3rd or a 4th grade class, my kids would do an activity like that or build a diorama. And we go down to Gloria's classroom or a lower grade classroom and have my kids teach what they built.
What grade were your students?
I taught everything from 2nd through 5th grade actually, but mostly 3rd and 4th grade. And the idea of them building, you may get the impression that most of my stuff in the classroom was hands-on and I would do my writing and my reading and all around some activity. But the kids would, in the classroom, I'd buy the animals out of the, back then it was at AC Moore with a 40% off coupon. And the kids would have 2 or 3 animals, create a habitat, talk about the food chain, all that stuff, and do a written report. And then they'd come down and they would teach it to the lower grades, and they would have their notes available, you know, and they would use them, but it was just a great review.
Yeah, and it's also really good at teaching like how to talk in front of people.
Oh, yeah.
What I was gonna say is that's your speaking and listening
Yeah,
skills.
yeah.
And then if somebody can actually explain something that shows true understanding of something, and then if they can answer questions about it, that even shows more understanding.
You really haven't taught anything unless you've changed behavior, unless they are able to demonstrate that.
Exactly.
Cause they can learn it all day, but will they be able to actually?
And they could take this activity, put the marbles in a plastic bag, fold that up, put it in a backpack, and when they unpack it, somebody's gonna ask them, what's that? And there you go. And that's my hope. I will tell the kids, I know your folks know this. They were taught this, but they may have forgotten it. So at dinner tonight, here's what I want you to bring up in conversation. Here's what I want you to say. Oh, and they would love it, and the parents would say, really? Let's not do that anymore. Oh yeah. I mean, just some obscure fact like you can't take a selfie of pie because you can't get everybody in the picture because it goes on forever, right? So. All right, I am done. Please give me your questions, your comments, and your thoughts.
You teach at Village?
I do.
So is that a curriculum they do, project-based learning there? Or-
Yes.
My brother goes there, I didn't know that.
What grade is he in?
First grade. He's in first grade.
Who's his teacher? You might not know. There's Bird. There's
She's been there for a really long time. She's the
that's
oldest.
probably Jernigan.
That's
Jernigan,
Jernigan,
yeah.
yes.
Brenda won't let me in her classroom. Something about being disruptive. I don't know.
My brother talks about science a lot, so I didn't know if you had them or not.
Absolutely.
He loves it.
And then what folks I like to, you know, all your academic vocabulary, your disciplinary vocabulary that you use. So often as teachers, do you recall when you were in school, how was vocabulary presented? It was at the beginning of a unit, here's our vocabulary words, and what did you do? What's that? Wrote down the definitions, yeah. And so here, he introduced the vocabulary within a context, and then he can go back and say, here's our vocabulary words, and then let the students come up with either their own definitions or look them up. And so you're doing it backwards because they have something to hang their hats on, because they experience it and it's not an abstract concept.
In my classroom, and this is just a Wielandism, in my classroom, when I would have done this experiment and I was done, I would have my students take out their journal, because they had to do journal writing every day. And I would have them, this would get, what was Robinson's first name, second grade teacher?
Katie?
Katie Robinson was so mad, she'd slam her door, because she was a published writer. I would have my kids stand in their chairs and chant, think more, write less. Think more, write less. Sit down and write about the experiment, because I want to teach them to be technical writers. You know, she was all about the sparkle words, and I just the facts, nothing but the facts, and get it done. And they would do that after the experiment, so that at the end of the day, they write about something else or build on what they wrote, but it wasn't a matter of sitting there trying to say, okay, well, what do we do?
And that's almost summarizing. It is summarizing
It
because
is.
they're being concise.
And I had a friend that, back when people cared about the writing portion of the SAT, that contracted to go through it, and with his load and the time that he could allocate, he only had about 1.5 minutes to go through what somebody wrote. He didn't care about conventions, he didn't care about anything but the facts. Just get it done, so I made my kids technical writers.
What you've done in your disciplinary literacy with reading and writing.
So you know they have, students have phonics cards. Is there a way that they can incorporate project-based learning with the phonics card, their words to learn weekly?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things that I do at Village, is like with first grade and third grade, is even when they get the unit, I'll sit down, because they have multiple teachers for all the grade levels up until fourth grade. Next year, they'll have a third, fourth grade. But teachers team teach. So I'll sit down with the person who is responsible for the science and talk about how we're gonna teach that, and what activity, hands-on activity I'm gonna use, and whether I'm gonna use that activity to introduce the unit or to summarize it, use the vocabulary so that they have it for their test, but put it in a real context. You know, and here's something that I see you guys doing it, and forgive me, I'm old school when I used to say guys, but at Village, every kid has a Chromebook. But in most classrooms, all that Chromebook is an electronic worksheet. The teacher is sitting at the desk on their computer, and the kids are sitting at their desk on their computer, and all it is an electronic worksheet, and we hate it.
No critical thinking.
This is the way to teach, in my opinion. It's a lot of work. Now, I say, when you walk into the classroom, it's survival the first couple of years. That's all it's gonna be, and if you survive, then you have done well. After that, then you can start innovating and doing nuances. Except for Gloria, on my grade level, I taught in isolation for 2 reasons. One, I was a male in a female environment, elementary school. 2 is nobody wanted to work as hard as I did, or she did. I mean, her classroom looked like a zoo. She raised quail. Can you get quail eggs? And then
No,
your bullfrogs?
chicken eggs and
Chicken eggs and
bullfrogs,
bullfrogs.
rabbits.
I didn't know you could do that.
Back then, the world,
Yeah.
It's a
the
different
world of
place.
teaching has changed so
I
much.
remember we grew plants in our elementary class, but I was just thinking like, I have chickens and I
Yeah,
have an
somebody-
incubator,
somebody
like, could I bring my chickens?
Raised chickens this year, I don't know who it was, but somebody, I had it on Facebook that they raised
Yeah.
chickens.
Kelsey was,
I don't know who it was.
she's got a snake in her room.
Yeah, I think she just has a snake, no chicken.
I have a quick question for you.
It better be quick, because I want to get out the door. You have 1 minute and 13 seconds.
Oh, you got class.
Do you try to
don't you?
incorporate STEM or STEAM into every subject area?
Well, here's what I did. I have, like I say, I have no special science background. I have the same background as you guys had, elementary, or for me it was elementary education. Fortunately, I came into teaching with a master's, but that was because the Army was very good to me. I mean, I took I got a GED in basic training, came out and with a master's degree. You guys were military, right? I was an E1 4 times. I had behavior problems. Anyway,
I think it's for the best of us.
I use science as a hook. With an experiment like this, what I could do is incorporate some sort of story within a reading context to deal with this. I could tie this in with what my math unit was. Hopefully at that moment I was in some area of geometry where I could do the rectangles and
Or the math problems.
or the, or rounding, but somewhere in there, and be able to go back to the experiment, which is what I would do early. And I did very, very little lecturing because I did all small groups. I was very fortunate. I recruited, and it would be unusual to come into my classroom without volunteers. And since I taught on Fort Bragg, and the Army went to the point where they had an hour and a half or more for lunch, I had green suits in my classroom helping out. And I will tell you, a kid having their parent walk in the classroom and helping. I had English as second language moms and they could file to help me out. But what was the biggest deal is I would take my low readers and I'd whisper to them, "You've got to teach Mrs. Poyster how to read." So she'd sit at the table and those kids would read to her and teach her about what it was they were reading. Bring those kids in. And then I had a homework station in my small groups. And kids that would put their effort in, their parents would complain to me, say, "You gotta send something home with that kid." I would give them a homework contract on Wednesday. My week started and ended on Wednesday because you lose so many Mondays and Fridays. If Monday or Friday is your introduction or test day, you're in big trouble. But you could do your homework over the weekend, where it start your week and end it on Wednesday. It worked well for me. Of course, it's my idea. Are we done?
I think so, but you're coming back. Yes, you are in the fall. Yeah, you are, but I got a new group of people to do it.
And she's got me in April, right? April something.
April
Hey.
On a
9th,
Saturday.
yeah.
Oh, you're coming to the expo?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice either.
Are you gonna be mad at me if I steal this? Because I was supposed to.
I'll tell you
do-
what, I'm gonna leave this expensive
Well,
stuff
I
with
learned
you.
a lesson, because I was just gonna steal a lesson from our book, which is about.
Let me tell you
the
this.
pendulums, but this
And
is amazing.
A mature educator should tell you this. If my bullet fits your gun, shoot it. Does that make sense?
You're gonna see this at the expo.
All right, and like I say,
This
Well,
would be a good one to do.
Because I was supposed to do the science lessons, but I think they're called pendulums, like the ball thing, except with weights and popsicle sticks. But I was like, this is so much easier,
Yeah.
like than having everyone build stuff out of popsicle sticks and not
Oh,
be able to.
yeah.
I would suggest that if you got lower elementary or whatever, that you take a piece of tape and tape that barrier. Otherwise, you'll be running all over the place, Jason. All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
This is for you. Thank you.
Wait, thank you.
You can have another one to put on your wall.
Thanks.
Should I tell them what you did? When you did a stage of protest?
You may tell them at some point, yeah. I've got, the classroom teacher's ready to do this activity, but I just, if I commit to something, I just try to be there. Gloria, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this.